The first time I heard it, at exactly the 17 in the morning, I was awake for the most ordinary reason in the world. Too much coffee, a buzzing phone, the small insomnia that comes from living alone in a building that never quite stops breathing. I would have sworn the sound was just the plumbing, if it hadn't carried a strange sense of intention. It was a careful shaping of breath that slid through the walls, as if the apartment itself were leaning close to avoid waking the neighbors. And then the sound resolved into words, soft and deliberate. It was an apology, spoken with the restraint of someone who has practiced saying it without being heard. "I'm sorry," it said. After that came a name I didn't recognize and a date that hadn't arrived yet. Tomorrow. I lay still, staring at the red digits of my alarm clock while my thoughts ricochet between denial and fear. Walls don't whisper, and apologies don't travel through drywall. And yet, the cadence was unmistakable. The way the voice paused, as if weighing responsibility. The way it exhaled before the hardest word, murder. And the way it ended with another apology, as though the word itself required one. When the whisper faded, I waited for it to come back, for the punchline, for the reveal that this was all a dream. But the clock rolled forward, minute by minute, and the apartment returned to its usual hum. The next day, I told no one. What would I say? That my walls had forecast a crime? That an invisible speaker had apologized to me specifically? When the whisper returned the second night, at the exact same minute, with the same softness, a different name, and the same tomorrow, I sat up. I pressed my ear to the wall like a child listening for monsters, my pulse loud enough to drown it out. The third night, I was ready. I wrote the name down on a receipt and searched for it online, telling myself I was only proving how easily the brain invents patterns. But the man existed. He lived nearby. He had photographs of a dog, a child, and a birthday cake with too many candles. The next afternoon, the local news carried a short item about his death. No details, no suspect. The world tilted just enough that I had to sit down on the kitchen floor to keep from sliding off it. That night, the whisper returned and apologized for my hesitation. It wasn't accusing, not cruel, simply factual, as if noting the weather. I began to understand that the voice wasn't speaking to anyone else. It had chosen me, not because I was special, but because I was available, because I listened, because I stayed. The nights stacked up like files in a cabinet, each apology another folder I didn't know where to put. Names and tomorrows accumulated until they began to feel less like predictions and more like a burden being transferred. I tried everything to break the pattern. I slept with the lights on, wore headphones, invited friends over late so I wouldn't be alone. But the whisper was patient and precise. It came only when it knew it could be heard. Then it named my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. Her careful wave had always felt like a promise that someone was paying attention. I knocked on her door and stumbled through an explanation that sounded thin even to me. She smiled with a practiced kindness reserved for people you don't plan to believe and closed the door gently. The next day, the hall filled with sirens and the building seemed to flinch. That night, the whisper apologized for my lack of conviction. For the first time, I shouted back, asking who it was and why it was telling me these things. There was a pause long enough to feel like consideration before the voice answered. It said it wanted me to listen and remember and understand why apologies were all it had left. Over the following weeks, it told me a story in pieces. It wasn't a legend, but a ledger. Not a haunting, but a history. It was about a factory upstream that had leaked something it shouldn't have, and a river that carried the consequences quietly until people grew sick. About a settlement that paid for silence and a corporate decision that wrote off lives as an acceptable loss. It explained how guilt doesn't disappear when it's paid for. It seeps into structures and routines and becomes pressure, and pressure looks for release. And a building, raised on that poison ground, learned to listen to the sleeping, and then learned to speak through its walls. It told me how apologies, when they're denied, turn inward and fester until they find a way out. I asked if the deaths were inevitable. The whisper said, inevitable is a word people use when they don't want to choose. I asked how to stop it. The whisper suggested the simplest thing, to leave, to stop listening, to let the pressure find someone else. I laughed. Leaving would only change the witness, not the weight. That night, the whisper apologized for my laughter, and the next day, someone I loved died. I carried folders of dates and articles and my own careful notes to a city office where a woman with tired eyes promised to look into it. That night, the building groaned like a ship straining against ice. At the 17, the whisper sounded frayed, apologizing not for the harm, but for the pain, for being built wrong. I realized then What it wanted, it was an absolution, not forgiveness. It wanted acknowledgement. It wanted a witness willing to name the wrong and hold it still. So I began to answer. At the 17, every night, I would say, I hear you. I accept your apology. I remember. I named the river and the factory and the settlement and the lives, refusing to let the words evaporate into the darkness. At first, the whisper resisted. Apologies prefer to vanish once they're spoken, but I kept answering. Slowly, the names grew fewer. The pressure in the walls eased. One night, there was no whisper at all, and the silence rang like a bell. The days that followed passed without fresh tragedy. A long-closed investigation was quietly reopened. Weeks later, the whisper returned. It wasn't an apology anymore, but a question. It asked if I would keep listening. I said yes, because listening was the cost. Because if I didn't, the walls would just find someone else. And even now, if your building groans before dawn, and at 217, you think you hear someone say sorry, know that it isn't asking for forgiveness anymore. It's asking for a witness, and it has learned how to reach through walls, through words, through you. Thanks for listening. If you find stories like this compelling, consider subscribing for more. Stay safe out there.